On the morning of October 27, 1962, a Soviet submarine commander named Vasily Arkhipov held the fate of human civilization in his hands. His submarine, B-59, sat trapped beneath the Caribbean waters, depth charges exploding above. The captain wanted to launch their nuclear torpedo. The political officer agreed, but Arkhipov refused. One man's vote prevented the extinction of millions, and almost no one in America knew how close the world had come to ending that day. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains the closest humanity has ever stood to the edge of nuclear annihilation. For 13 days in October 1962, two superpowers aimed enough destructive force at each other to end civilization as we know it. This is the story of how it began, how it nearly spiraled beyond control, and how a combination of courage, restraint, and sheer luck pulled the world back from the abyss. The roots of the crisis stretched back years before the first Soviet missile arrived in Cuba. When Fidel Castro seized power in 1959, alarm bells rang throughout Washington. A communist revolution 90 miles from Florida represented an ideological threat that American leadership could not tolerate. The failed Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 only deepened Castro's alliance with Moscow and humiliated the young Kennedy administration. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev watched these events carefully, seeing both danger and opportunity. By summer 1962, Khrushchev had authorized Operation Anadir, a massive secret deployment of nuclear missiles to Cuban soil. His motivations were complex. The Soviet Union faced a significant strategic disadvantage in nuclear weapons delivery. American Jupiter missiles sat in Turkey, capable of striking Soviet cities within minutes. Placing missiles in Cuba would balance this equation while simultaneously protecting their Caribbean ally from another American invasion attempt. Throughout the summer and early fall, Soviet ships carried their deadly cargo across the Atlantic. Medium-range ballistic missiles, intermediate-range missiles, nuclear warheads, Il-28 bombers, 42,000 Soviet military personnel. The operation unfolded with remarkable secrecy, hidden beneath canvas covers and moved only at night. American intelligence suspected increased Soviet military activity in Cuba, but lacked confirmation of its true nature. That changed on October 14, 1962. Major Richard Heiser piloted his U-2 spy plane over western Cuba, his cameras capturing images that would shake the world. Photo analysts at the National Photographic Interpretation Center studied the grainy black-and-white photographs and identified what they feared most: nuclear missile launch sites under construction near San Cristobal. President Kennedy received the news on the morning of October 16th. The photographs showed medium-range ballistic missiles capable of striking Washington, D.C. within 13 minutes of launch. The president immediately assembled a group of his most trusted advisors, later known as the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or EXCOM. The debates that followed revealed deep divisions over how America should respond. Military leaders, including Air Force General Curtis LeMay, pushed aggressively for immediate airstrikes followed by a full-scale invasion. LeMay dismissed concerns about Soviet retaliation, comparing Kennedy's caution to appeasement at Munich. Other voices urged restraint, warning that any military action could trigger an uncontrollable escalation toward thermonuclear war. Attorney General Robert Kennedy emerged as a crucial voice for moderation. He reminded the group of America's own history, questioning whether a surprise attack on Cuba would align with the nation's values. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara proposed a naval blockade, which they termed a quarantine, to avoid the legal implications of an act of war. On the evening of October 22nd, President Kennedy addressed the nation. 70 million Americans watched as their president revealed the Soviet deception and announced the naval quarantine. Kennedy demanded the removal of all offensive weapons from Cuba and warned that any nuclear missile launched from Cuba would be regarded as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring full retaliatory response. The world held its breath. Soviet ships continued steaming toward the quarantine line. American forces went to DEFCON 2, the highest alert level ever reached during the Cold War. B-52 bombers armed with nuclear weapons circled in holding patterns, ready to strike. Then came October 24th. Soviet ships approaching the quarantine line stopped dead in the water. Secretary of State Dean Rusk turned to National Security Advisor McGeorge Bundy and said words that would echo through history. "We're eyeball to eyeball, and I think the other fellow just blinked." But the crisis was far from over. The missiles already in Cuba continued toward operational readiness. Khrushchev sent conflicting messages, one conciliatory, one demanding American missiles be removed from Turkey. Then, on October 27th, a Soviet surface-to-air missile shot down Major Rudolf Anderson's U-2 over Cuba, killing the pilot. Pressure for military action reached its peak. Kennedy chose a remarkable path. He publicly accepted Khrushchev's first proposal, while secretly agreeing to remove American missiles from Turkey. He gave the Soviets a face-saving exit. On October 28th, Radio Moscow announced the Soviet Union would dismantle and remove their missiles from Cuba. The world exhaled. What few understood then was how many moments of potential catastrophe had passed unnoticed. Vasily Arkhipov on submarine B-59, a Soviet radar operator who chose not to report a Norwegian scientific rocket as an American first strike. Communications delays that could have been misinterpreted as attacks. The Cuban Missile Crisis taught both superpowers that the nuclear game had no winners. Within months, a direct hotline connected Washington and Moscow. Within a year, the Limited Test Ban Treaty was signed. The Cold Warriors had glimpsed the void and stepped back. 13 days in October 1962 remind us that history often turns on individual choices made under impossible pressure. The story of how we survived demands to be remembered, studied, and shared with those who never knew how close we came. There are more stories like this waiting to be told on this channel.